Hi, my name's Ashley Burnett. I'd like to welcome you to the 21st Century Local History Club. What might your name be?
My name is Wilma Beyer. Hi,
Nice to
Ashley.
meet you.
Nice meeting you.
What were your occupations?
My occupations, I was a registered nurse, and I worked at the hospital for a couple years, and then I worked private duty for a couple years. In between, I had a child. I was married and had a little girl. And then I did mostly private duty for several years. And then my principal from my high school contacted me to see if I might consider helping him out with a woman who was our school librarian who had cancer. And they were looking for home care nurses. So I agreed to help them out, and she was in her final stages. She was terminally ill, so I took care of her until she passed away. Then he felt a little bit obligated to help me out because he wanted to be able to give me a little bit of a part-time job. So he offered me a job working in Amherst High School as a school nurse, assistant to the high school nurse. So I worked there for 14 years.
When you said private duty, what do you mean by that?
Private duty is when you go into the hospital, you're hired by the family to take care of a person. You just take care of one person. When I first graduated from nurses training, I worked in the surgical recovery room. So that was kind of a interesting few months. And that's when I got pregnant and had my baby, and so I sort of stayed home for a year or so, and then I went back and did some private duty.
Do you have any other occupations?
Oh, my husband tries to keep me kind of busy. He's involved with a few different things in the town, so I sort of help him out. We're very involved with the Relay for Life, which is coming up in June. And he's just had a very successful chicken barbecue at the Masonic Lodge, where they sold over 700 chickens, half chickens, dinners.
Poor things.
And he keeps me busy. He's involved with lots of different organizations and groups, and when he just had a hip replacement done in March, and so I was kind of helping him out with that. So other than that, we're also involved with the Syracuse Club of Western New York, which he's a member of, but I sort of go along and help him out with that too. Syracuse Club of Western New York, the Alumni Club. Got a banquet coming up for that, along with a couple other functions that fall in between, before and after. So other than that, I belong to a Women's Health Initiative group at University of Buffalo, which is a group that's trying to explore women's health, because men's health has had the highlight for several years, and they're trying to pinpoint problems with women's health. So I'm involved with that. So other than that, I have a granddaughter that's very active in sports at Williamsville North, and we try to get to see some of her activities, but we haven't had much luck this spring. She was supposed to be running a track meet yesterday at 4 o'clock, but I don't think that went off because it was kind of nasty weather.
Have you always lived in Akron?
No, I've only lived in Akron for the last about 21 years.
It's a long time.
Actually 20 years. Yeah. Before that, when I worked at Amherst High School, I lived in the town of Amherst.
Where did you live? Oh, you lived in Amherst.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What other athletes have you met besides your husband?
What other athletes? I've met quite a few of them since I've met my husband. Lots of them. But I've also met some baseball players. Matt Winters was a baseball player that my husband got to know. Actually, his sister Debbie Winters contacted us, and
just a reminder,
we got to know her quite well.
Being held in the Library Media Center. I repeat, the faculty meeting will be held in the Library Media Center.
Debbie Winters was very active in the Lothorian group with horses. They work with handicapped children and adults, and they have horseback riding for the handicapped. And then once a year they have a fundraiser, and they call and ask for celebrities, and my husband got to go to that for several different years. So other activities, other athletes. Primarily wrestlers is what I've met since my meeting with my husband, and football players, baseball players, you know. That's about it.
What is it like to live with a famous person?
It keeps me busy. He's very famous. It was really very interesting the first time I went to Japan, and I think a lot of the students who went to Japan with Coach for swimming, and we went with the Syracuse football team for a bowl game to Japan, and people who had known Coach for a number of years had heard him talk about how popular he was in Japan, but they never realized his popularity until we actually got over there with these people and they saw how popular he was in Japan. He just, he's like, well, Yogi Berra is a very popular person. A lot of baseball players would know him. And Hulk Hogan, he's very popular here. A lot of famous actors, John Wayne. He's as popular as that guy was in Japan. He's very, very well known. Of course, in Japan, he always wears a mask, so he's got friends in Japan who've never seen his face. They've never seen him without that mask on.
Any questions for the audience so far?
I do have a couple of questions. When you're talking about the famous wrestlers and famous people that you know, who's the most unique wrestler other than Coach?
Well, a young boy that he trained, his name is Mike Rotundo. He graduated from Syracuse University, and Coach trained him to be a professional wrestler, and I think he wrestles very similar to what Coach wrestled when he was wrestling full time.
Does he wrestle here in Western New York?
No. He lives in Tampa, Florida. He primarily, the last several years, he's primarily wrestled in Japan. But he used to work as the IRS or Mr. Money or something. What is his name? I can't remember his name, but I don't remember his name, but I know he did wrestle.
He did wrestle around here.
Yeah, he did wrestle in Buffalo several different times. But he's very
Wall
good.
Street.
Yeah.
Wall Street. That's
Yeah.
his name?
Yeah.
Wall Street.
That's what he wrestled as.
And IRS.
The IRS.
So you enjoyed watching him because he was reminiscent of Coach's techniques? when he
Yes.
wrestled?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now I have another question. How do you like Japan? What's your most favorite memory of visits to Japan?
Well, the people are very, very friendly, and every time we go over there, we come home with gifts. I mean, they're just so generous, and they're so concerned and so considerate. They want to make sure that I'm having a good time. They think that he's not showing me enough of the sights, and so oftentimes friends of his will take me sightseeing to see different places that they're afraid he hasn't taken me to.
Is there a place that stands out in your memory as particularly beautiful?
Well, when we took the swim team to Japan, we went to Kyoto, and beautiful temples and the
4:30
coloring.
detention is being held in room H205. I repeat, 4:30 detention is being held in room H205.
It was in December, and the coloring there was like fall here. Very brilliant reds, and just the hues were so pretty. We took quite a few pictures. In fact, I had one picture which I really liked, and I had it blown up and framed for my daughter, and she really likes it a lot. But we've been to Osaka, and we've been to Kyoto, and my husband's friends have taken me to a temple where they had beautiful wisteria vines with the wisteria flowers all over the place. It was beautiful. But we saw Mount Fuji from a distance, but I never really have been that close to Mount Fuji.
So that's something for you to do in the future?
I guess so, yeah.
Any more questions?
I would love to know more about the women's initiative you're working with.
The Women's Health Initiative?
Yes.
Yeah, it's It's a program that's been taken, it's been going on for about 7 years now. I think we've got 2 or 3 more years to go. It's just a study of women's health. They've got one group of women that they're doing an estrogen study with. Another group of women, it's calcium. And then another group of women is with diet.
Will they make recommendations based on their study?
They, hopefully, yeah. They've just recently eliminated giving me estrogen because of all the bad reports they've gotten about the estrogen. But lots of time, like I'm on a calcium program and the diet program. And we're supposed to take, keep records of what we eat, like three days out of a month for 3 months. And then the 3rd month we have a meeting at the University of Buffalo. And we hand in our results of the diets that the 3 days of our diets that we've taken records of. I'm on the calcium program. I don't know if they're giving me the real calcium or I'm taking the placebo. So they monitor, because I'm supposed to take more calcium too, and they monitor the amount that I take at home along with what they're giving me so that I don't overdose on the calcium. They have records of that, so that you can't overdose on the amount that you take at home. But they keep records, and hopefully at the end of the 10-year period they'll compile all the records and be able to see if keeping control of the fat intake, and if the calcium has helped the women's bone structure any more than they've known in the past.
Are they doing bone density testing with you?
They don't do that, but I have had it done myself. And I'm also on a medication to help prevent osteoporosis by my obstetrician gynecologist. They've decided to, they prescribed that for me. But we're supposed to be getting the results from these tests and find out if we have had actually the real calcium or the placebo at the end of the 10 years.
Must
But
feel good to keep your foot in the health field.
Yes, it is.
Do you miss working there, or
No.
is this just fine just doing this?
This is just fine. The first 9 years that I was a high school nurse, it was very interesting. But then the kids took a 360-degree turnaround, and it was not fun. I couldn't wait to get out of the school system. But, and then I was hired as a school nurse assistant, so I wasn't being paid nurses' wages, and so that was kind of frustrating. I battled that all the time that I was working there, but I never had any success. So I had to work 14 years to get 10 years credit, and I'm not getting an awful big retirement, let me tell you. But at least I'm getting something. If I'd left before the 14 years, I wouldn't have gotten anything.
So you really could be quite an advocate for equal rights for women at
Right.
this point.
Could be. Yeah.
I could see you working in that area.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful to have that
Yeah.
kind of help.
Yeah. So, anything else?
Yes. Can you tell how World War II, the Korean War, the World Trade Center affected your life?
Well, World War II was it made a big impression on me because I was only a child at the time. And you just, every day you'd see these big headlines of this war and on and on and on. It just seemed like it was never going to end. And it was just so tragic, to have all these men killed. In fact, I just saw something on the computer about all the soldiers that were killed in France, and all these cemeteries in France that have all these millions of American soldiers that were killed over there, and how France was one of the first ones not to join us in this last conflict. The Korean War, at that time, I wasn't married when that started. My first husband was in the military, and luckily he got sent to Germany, so I didn't have to be concerned about his welfare when he was in Germany. And he came back, and we got married and had our child, and then in 1979 he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and died in 1980. And that's when I met Coach Beyer. He came to Amherst High School as a wrestling coach, and that's how we met. He came into the clinic and asked me if I'd weigh in his wrestlers for him, so I agreed, and in the following year we started dating, and after 3 years we got married. The other war was, the World Trade Center. That was tragic. My sisters, I have 4 sisters. There was 5 girls and 1 boy. For several years, we've taken what we call a sister's trip every summer. Well, then, about 3 years ago, my oldest sister died of cancer. So that following summer, we didn't really know if we were going to take a trip or not. So we sort of waited till the end of the summer, and we took my mom. I've got a 93, well, she's 94 years old now, my stepmom. And we took our mom and my 3 sisters and I and a cousin who joins us. We took her to Canada, to Fort Erie, to the racetrack, because she loves the races. She's legally blind, but she loves the races. So my other sister read her the program for the race horses, and she bet on them. And then we played a few slot machines, and we had dinner. Then we stayed in a little hotel in Niagara Falls. And the next morning we got up and we were going to go into Niagara on the lake. So we went into Niagara Falls to have breakfast, and that's when we heard about the World Trade Center. We heard that a plane had gone into the World Trade Center. And we figured, like everyone else, it was just an accident. And then we got in and sat down, and someone says, oops, another plane went into the World Trade Center. So then we realized it wasn't an accident. Then we heard about the one in Pennsylvania, and the one at the Pentagon. And we decided we'd go on up to Niagara on the lake, but we just couldn't enjoy ourselves. And then we heard that they were closing down the bridges, so we figured we better get back home. So we got over the bridge, so we were very lucky. Then we took my mom home, and then my other 3 sisters and I decided that we would go ahead. We went up to Letchworth State Park, and we stayed overnight, a couple nights there, but it was so quiet. There was no airplanes flying, and it just seemed so strange not to see any or hear any airplanes. But it was really such a tragedy, and it's still bearing a lot of bad feelings on a lot of people. I don't think it'll ever be forgotten. How can you forget something like that?
Did you have the feeling, like I did, that now we weren't even safe at home anymore?
Yeah.
That's I think, the biggest influence
Yeah.
that had on me.
And you're concerned about your children, grandchildren. Yeah. But,
Anything else you would like to add?
oh, I don't think so. I've enjoyed living here in Akron and getting involved with lots of different organizations and keeping busy.
They're lucky to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it was very nice meeting you.
It was nice meeting you.
Enjoyed talking.
Thank you. I
And-
enjoyed being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Jan Saviola, welcome to Akron's 21st Century Local History Club.
Shan, my name is Dick Beyer, commonly known as the Destroyer and Dr. X in various parts of the world.
Dr. X,
Yes.
how'd you get that name?
I went to a promoter in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he said, Dick, he says, I know the Destroyer is very popular, he says, but most of the people in the United States know that the Destroyer under the mask is Dick Beyer. And I said to him, well, who's Dick Beyer? And he says, I want you to come into Minneapolis. And when a promoter tells you he would like you to come into a territory, he's usually going to make you money. So I told him I would come, and he says, well, come under another mask. So I went there the first time to a studio show, similar to the same size as this studio here, and they had a ring in there, and there was an audience, and I went in there with a paper bag on my head with 2 eyes, and I sat in the audience, and this Marty O'Neill, who was the announcer, came over and he says, are you in the right place? I says, I don't think it's your business. Well, you're sitting here with a bag on your head. I says, I might be the only person in Minneapolis right now with a bag on my head, but I don't think that's any business of yours. So a couple of weeks went by, and then I put a mask on, and I created some activity one day, and which I would normally do a lot of times. I did something that was nasty. They hated me for it, but you know what? They paid to see me.
It's always good. Can you tell us how you got into wrestling?
I got into wrestling. I'll start from the beginning. My fraternity father at Syracuse University in Phi Gamma Delta fraternity was captain of the wrestling team. And he and the team needed a heavyweight wrestler on the team because the current heavyweight wrestler, who was a football player like I was, blew his knee out wrestling, and they needed a heavyweight. So I became Syracuse University's heavyweight, and this was in my sophomore year, near the end of the season. And then I wrestled my junior year and senior year, and even in grad school I wrestled. And the promoter from this area of Western New York by the name of Ed Don George saw me wrestle as an amateur. And he asked me if I at one time or another would like to become a professional. I says, I might. So he gave me free passes to all the arenas that he promoted, which were Rochester, Syracuse, and Buffalo. And anytime I wanted to go watch, I was welcome to go to the matches. And if I wanted to take somebody, I could take him to the matches. And when I went to the nationals, when I was in graduate school, I did very well. And when I came back from there, I called him, and he sent me down to Columbus, Ohio, where I learned how to become a professional wrestler.
And that's how you became one?
That's it.
And you were obviously very successful, because I just heard you got into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Congratulations on that.
I wasn't very successful right off the bat. Everybody starts out at the bottom. I worked 2 or 3 days a week. I stayed in a motel in Columbus, Ohio, and I probably wrestled 3 times a week. And I might have made 3 times a week. I might have made $100. And there was a promoter down from Bolling Green, Kentucky, came up to Columbus, Ohio, and he wanted 4 wrestlers, and he wanted some wrestlers that they didn't need. So I was one of the wrestlers that they didn't need in Columbus because it was a very big territory. And another fellow by the name of Leon Graham and 2 other wrestlers. Well, Leon and I were what is called a baby face. Do you know what a baby face is?
No.
Look at my face. Does it look like a baby face? You're going to say no, aren't you?
No, not exactly.
Does it look like a heel? Do you know what a heel is? When you go to a movie or you watch television, there is usually a baby face and a heel. And the baby face is the nice guy. And the heel is the nasty guy. Well, I was a baby face. And I went down to Bolling Green, Kentucky as a baby face. And there was 2 heels in that territory by the name of Tor Morgan and Jules Lawrence. And the other wrestler from Columbus and I, Leon Graham, and I went down there. And we formed a territory, 4 people. Now, that was a territory. When I left Columbus, there was 40 wrestlers there and big names. Now, I'm down in Columbus, Ohio, and we worked Evansville, Indiana on Monday. We worked Bolling Green on Tuesday. We worked Glasgow, Kentucky, big towns, right?
Yeah.
On Wednesday.
Yeah.
Hopkinsville on Thursday, Paducah on Friday, and Somerset on Saturday. All within maybe a 100-mile radius of Bolling Green. And I averaged making about $20 to $25 a night. Now you're going to say, that's not much money, but back then, that was about an average of $150 a week. And if you ask the school teachers around Akron Central what they were making in 1954, it wasn't $140 or $50 a week. Anyway, that is where I learned how to become a professional wrestler, because I wrestled every night and I was on the road. I went from Blytheville, Arkansas to Bristol, Tennessee. You know how far that is?
I'm thinking.
Blytheville is over on the, Blytheville, Arkansas is across the Mississippi River. And Bristol, Tennessee is the next town over. You're in North Carolina. So better than 500 miles. And I made that trip and made $15. So those are some of the times that I wrestled and I got paid, but I didn't make any money because it cost me more by car and gasoline and food to go from Blytheville to Bristol. But that's the way wrestlers broke into the business back in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
I didn't become a instant star. In fact, when I was in that particular territory, I got a picture made, 8x10 photograph, and I put my name on the bottom, Dick Beyer, and I took a nice piece of paper like this, and I wrote a story about Dick Beyer, where he came from, and so on and so forth. Today they call it a what?
Autobiography.
An autobiography. And what did you say? A biography. When you go for a job, you write out a
Resume.
resume. That's it. So I made this resume and I sent it to 50 different promoters around the country because I wanted to go from this little territory to bigger places and make money. And I had this promoter back in Buffalo that sent me down to Columbus. But I wanted to go other places than my hometown because I didn't want to wrestle in my hometown as somebody that didn't have the experience. I wanted to go back to my hometown knowing everything about the business and create a great big splash and so that people would want to come to see me. So I sent 50 promoters a letter. Now I'm going to ask you the $64 question. How many answers do you think I got?
1, 0.
0. 0. You know why? They didn't know who Dick Beyer was. I had no experience. A wrestler came into Bolling Green from Chicago. And he went back to Chicago and told them about this great babyface wrestler that was down in Kentucky by the name of Dick Beyer. And I got a phone call from Chicago. And in the fall of '55, I went to Chicago. And in 3 months, I became the Rookie of the Year.
Wow.
And then I went to Hawaii because one time I wrestled against a fellow, an old timer by the name of Sander Kovacs. And Sander Kovacs said, wherever you are, or I am, I'm going to bring you into the territory because you got wrestling. I was a wrestler, and I wrestled in college, and I portrayed wrestling in the ring. So I got to go to Hawaii for $150 a week guarantee. And transportation there and back, and I only had to wrestle once a week. I was on the beach every day. Now I'm going to tell you something, how a college education will pay off for you. Now, I graduated from Syracuse and got a master's degree in education. I went down to the school board and applied in Hawaii for substitute teaching. And I went down early when I was over there. I signed a contract for 4 months. And I wrestled once a week. $150. Went down there Thursday. We wrestled on Wednesday. I went there Thursday, They paid me cash, $150. And I paid out of that my hotel and right on Waikiki, my food, and I saved $100 a week. So I applied for substitute teaching. You know how many phone calls I got the first week?
0?
Same number as I got when I sent out my resume. The second week, I get a phone call from a school called Kaimuki. And it's kind of a rough school. Schools in Hawaii are much different than schools up here and around Akron, because schools in Hawaii, there are no halls. The halls are outside. Well, they're covered because it rains a lot in Hawaii, but they are open corridors. So it would be like going outside, go into your next class and go in. They called me at 8 o'clock to get to Kaimuki High School, which was about 15 minutes from where I was living in Waikiki. I got there about 8:25 and they said, here's your roll call, go to room 222, take roll call and pass your class. So I go down there and all these kids are laying outside like this. And there are 3 great big Hawaiian football players. And I said, everybody come on in so I could take roll call. And these 3 great big Hawaiians, they're sitting there. I said, do you speak English? Because I'd only been in Hawaii a short time, and Hawaii was bombed when I was 12 years old. Now this is only 12 years from that. They bombed Pearl Harbor, and then, well, it's a little bit longer than that, 15 years. So they bombed Pearl Harbor when I was just 11 years old. And so I'm in Hawaii now, and I don't know whether they speak English. It wasn't a state then. So they said yes. They talk over there like this. Hey, brother, how you do? You go down to the beach today? Yeah. So I learned that after going. So anyway, without pulling off my mic, I get up and I go outside and I said, do you people need help? I probably got out of camera, but I'm going to sit back down again. And 2 of them got up and moved in, and the 3rd one never moved. Well, I grabbed him by the seat of the pants, lifted him up, run him in, and I set him in a seat, and I said, don't you move. He didn't laugh like you are.
That's not the one in trouble.
So the bell rings, and all the kids stand up. I said, sit down. Boy, and they all sat back down. And I told that guy, don't you move until I tell you. This is how you impress people. A lot of people. And here's how that particular incident went around Hawaiian Islands in 24 hours. The bell rings a second time and they get up again. And I say, sit down a second time. By now, the class that's coming into this classroom is outside. And I said, after I got finished taking a roll call, you may leave. This guy gets up. Sit down. He sat back down again. The rest of you may leave. So now the class is outside and I have a one-on-one with this guy. And I says, I don't care how tough you are or how smart you are. I'm a school teacher, I'm here to help you. I says, and you're trying to be a tough guy. This is not the place. Do you play football? He says, yes. The place to be a tough guy is on the football field. I says, I'll bet you aren't too tough on the football field. You know, I says, I played at Syracuse and I wrestled professionally. I'm wrestling down. If you want to see how tough I am, you come down to the King's Auditorium. I said, now you leave. The next class came in. It was as quiet as a church mouse. I did my classes. At noon, I went to lunch, the cafeteria for the faculty. Every teacher in that room came up to me. He says, what did you do to that boy? I says, I didn't do a thing. He says, he came into our class. He's as quiet as a church mouse. He's usually in lots of trouble, but he wasn't any trouble. The next morning, 7:30, my phone is ringing. I got 6 phone calls from different high schools around Hawaii. Would I like to come in and be a substitute? So I got so busy as a substitute, I wasn't going to the beach. So now I used to use the weather as my judge whether I was going to go to work or not. When the phone would ring, I'd look out the window. It's a sunny day. I'm sorry, I'm going to another school today. And I'd go to the beach. So that's how you can make an impression on an island. And I went to Hawaii, and I don't know what question this all got into that you were asking me, but you got an answer anyway.
I didn't even get asked a question about that. Gosh, you were never that mean in my class.
Well,
You were my gym teacher.
I could not do that today.
Two little kindergartners.
If I did that today, right here in Akron, I touched a boy's head like this, and I said, come here. He was a 4th or a 5th grader, and we were outside on the athletic field. The next period, there's another boy in class, and I said, come here, line up. So I'm trying to get him to line up. 3 o'clock, Mr. Haidt comes down, or he phones me, he says, could you come to my office when school is finished? So I go to his office, he says, did you grab somebody by the hair outside today? I said, yeah. Did you drag 2 people? And I said, yes. I says, I was trying to get their attention. Did you know they were brothers? And I said, this was when I was brand new teacher. He says, no, I didn't know they were brothers. He says, don't touch the kids. And I said, okay. So I never touched another one. But it was tough getting their attention.
I remember you as a gym teacher.
I remember you too.
You're not supposed to remember that.
Why not?
Because I was an ugly little kid. And it's probably quite annoying too.
I don't remember that. I remember a couple of annoying kids, but you weren't one of them.
Actually, I remember a lot from you. And okay, you lived in Japan for a while, and obviously everyone knows that you're very popular over in Japan. And can you tell me how they reacted towards you?
When?
First time?
First time, okay. You know, when you become popular, you never know it. I put a mask on in 1962. I went from Hawaii in 62 to Los Angeles and put a mask on, only because the promoter said, you're such a good-looking guy. And let me start this again. My wife says, you know what? He says, you're so good looking, you should wear a mask. He says, and then all those girls won't be chasing you.
You told us
You
in
believe that
elementary
happened?
school. You told us that in elementary
Yes,
school.
I did. That's not a true story, but it always gets a nice laugh. I went to LA and the promoter says, we're going to put a mask on you as the Destroyer. And I did. 6 months later, the Destroyer won the WWA World Championship, and I was the world champion. Now, the magazines on the East Coast, they want to do stories about the Destroyer, and I became very popular all over the United States as the Destroyer. And I was the world champion out in LA, Hawaii, Japan. They recognized the WWA. And I went to Japan to wrestle a fellow by the name of Ricky Dozan. He was their champion, a former sumo champion, and I wrestled him in front of 70 million people
Oh my gosh.
on television.
I don't think I could do that.
To this day, it's the second highest rated television show on a commercial radio station
Wow.
in Japanese history.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Did you ever remember black and white television?
Well, I had a black and white TV
Oh, you
in
did?
my room
Oh, okay.
when I was really young.
It was on black and white, and there were most of the people in Japan did not have a television set. There was 10,000 people watched it in a train station. They had it up on a wall. They had this matches on, and I got a picture of people, 10,000 of them jammed in this train station wanting to watch. So anyway, I became very popular in one day.
Wow.
70 million people.
Overnight success.
Now but prior to going there, I wrestled a fellow by the name of Giant Baba. This was in January, February, March of '62. And there were lots of Japanese reporters that watched at ringside in Los Angeles, and they were taking these photos back to Japan. So when I got to Japan to wrestle this Ricky Dozan in front of, it was a packed arena, and I said, how am I gonna attack this? Well, I went in there like I owned the world. I strutted in there. I saw a fellow by the name of Killer Kowalski, and I slapped him, in the ring, and he was American. And now this guy was a villain. They were kind of cheering me a little bit. But the next night I wrestled as Ricky Dozan, and they weren't cheering me. So anyway, that's how I became very popular in Japan as far as wrestling is concerned. That was in '63. I went back there, I came back to the States, I wrestled around, I went back to Japan. Again, I have never taken the mask off in Japan. I've gone through customs, through immigration, with a mask on. Since 9/11, it's a little more difficult. Because the Japanese know who I am, but you go through with a Frenchman or a German and you're going through customs in Japan, you don't know what that guy's gonna do when you're walking through with a mask on. So I pick my spots whether I'm gonna wear the mask or not. Because if I take the mask off, they still don't know who I am. See, this is the advantage. I can walk down the street without the mask, but when I drive a car in Japan with the mask on, the people, they say, Destroyer, how are you doing? And they let me in, and they say, go ahead. Japan has a lot of people and a lot of cars, and it's traffic jams all over. But when I had the mask on, oh, go ahead. Now, when I drove without the mask, they don't know who I am. And I know my wife has been on an interview here, and she has said that they treat her very well, which they do. And they treat me very well. But American friends of mine have told me, take that damn mask off and walk around and see how you get treated. You will not be treated the same way. I like being treated good, so I wear the mask. But I'll tell you what, I got involved. Ricky Dozan died. And then I got involved with another group in Japan in 1972. And there weren't many good wrestlers in this group. And I went over there and I talked to this Giant Baba again. And he was the boss then. I said, you need me. You need me for your company. If you pay me $1,000 a week and pay for my wife and 3 kids' expenses, I'll come over and wrestle for you for a year. Now, you remember what I made way back when?
Yeah, 150 or whatever.
He says, I'll tell you what we'll do. we'll give you $2,000 a week. You pay your own expense. So I said, that sounds pretty good. So I went there for a year. I got involved in a television show as a slapstick comedian. And this slapstick comedian was on a show that was the #1 rated show on Japanese television. I had my picture, and you can tell you're popular when you get your picture on TV Guide. Yeah, you ever had your picture on TV Guide?
No.
I have, and it's exciting. I got an award for it, picture on TV Guide. Anyway, that show, I was very popular in wrestling, but that show put me in contact with another group of people that never watched wrestling. So wrestling became very popular because of me on this comedy show. It was difficult for me to wrestle in some matches because if I did anything at all in the ring that was funny, they would laugh. And they would flash back to the TV show. So I had to be very careful. And my boss, this giant papa, says, don't be funny. Okay, I wasn't funny. I used to say, damare. Damare means shut up to the people, you know. Damare! Well, they laughed when I said, because I probably didn't pronounce it right. And it was funny to them, so I stopped doing that. So I went there for 1 year and stayed 6. So that's really how, and I still go there. They call me to do television shows. They've called me for appearances. I had a hip replaced, and because I had trouble with my hips. So last summer I went 5 times, 3 times by myself. And then the last time I came home, I told my wife, I said, that's the last time I'm going by myself. If anybody calls me to go to Japan, you're going along. So I get a call about the middle of September. Can you come over for 30th anniversary show? I said, yes, I can, if you pay for 2 airplane tickets and give me my guarantee that I normally get. Says, why do you need 2 people? I says, I need my wife to put on my shoes. That sounds like a demeaning expression, but I could not bend down to get my shoe on. I couldn't put my sock on. So I finally after I found out, I went to therapy, I found out they have a machine that you could throw down and put your sock on. And I told my wife she was out of job. But anyway, I got to travel over there in October with my wife. So I still go back, and I'm just today, I talked with some amateur wrestlers, and I'll take a group of amateur wrestlers over in July. Now, amateur wrestlers, I mean a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, along with a coach and maybe a couple parents, and we'll do this in July, and then in August, I'll probably go back over for a festival that is in an area of Tokyo. But I still go back, and very popular, people come here, had a nice experience. I took the swim team to New York. We had our picture in a Japanese newspaper in New York City. Somebody in Long Island that's Japanese called that newspaper company, which was called Yomiuri Shimbun, and they said, do you have a contact of the destroyer? And they says, yes. So they called me, the newspaper, and I wrote to this fellow who was trying to get a hold of me. He wanted to bring his mother to Buffalo to meet me. His mother was 70 years old. His mother's dream. Now, get this now. You're an Akron Central School student, and I'm a little teacher and a coach. The dream for that 78-year-old woman was to meet the destroyer. How do you like that? And that we worked it out. He flew from Long Island to Tokyo, got his mother back to Long Island, the mother and a sister, aunt. They came to Buffalo, and we had a nice meeting, and then we took them down to Niagara Falls, Ontario, to a Japanese restaurant that my wife and I like to go to called Yukiguni. If you ever want to go to good Japanese food, don't go to this samurai place and things like that. Go to Yukiguni in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. It is just like walking in to a sushi or a sashimi shop in Tokyo. So anyway, that's, you know, when things like that happen, you feel pretty good.
Ego booster.
Yes, it is. You know, when I want an ego booster, I'll tell you what an ego booster is for me. I go to Japan, and I'll put I got the mask on. I'll go to a fish market. It's called Tsukiji. This fish market is about the size of Akron Central School and the football fields around it. That's how big this fish market is.
Wow.
When I walk in there, hey, Destroyer, how are you? There's these little markets. There's stands about as big as this table, a little bit bigger. There's just fish, and they're all over the place. And I take my swimmers, and we go in there at 7 o'clock in the morning to the fish market, because that's when they sell the fish. They have auctions. So I walk down there, and my wife has been with me, and I take, well, right here you got a teacher. He'll tell you. You go see Mr. Job.
I know Mr. Job.
You know Mr. Job?
Yeah.
You go see Mr. Job, and you ask him, Tsukiji. Do you know anything about Tsukiji? Tsukiji. Don't worry about Tsukiji. Ask him if he ever went to the fish market. Okay? In Japan. He's got movies of it.
He does?
Yes, he has, because I've seen him. Anyway, I really get an ego kick when I go there because everybody knows who I am there. Because these people are blue collar. Destroyer, hey, how you doing? Hey, I go there, and when I get out of there, boy, I feel good. Boy, I got my ego.
Let me see.
How much am I getting paid an hour for this TV show?
0.
Zero. I've given you a couple of zeros earlier. I got another 0.
Life is cyclical, isn't it?
You just recently moved to Akron. Kind of recently.
Recently?
Well, kind of recently.
What is recent to you?
Recent.
Give me a date.
1986.
1986?
Yeah.
I bought my first piece of property in Akron on the corner of Rapids and Greenbush in 1960.
I was when my mom was born.
That's what I was going to say.
That's not
So-
recent, but so
But
what?
you know what? I'm going to tell you one thing. That doesn't make me an Akronite. I'm sorry. I became a citizen of the year in Akron, but I'm still not, quote, an Akronite. You got to be born here.
I was born here. Well, I
So
was born
you're
in
an
Amherst,
Akronite.
but- So.
Nancy, are you an Akronite?
Just a little.
Just a little? You were born here. Yeah. So, but Jim wasn't.
I have a road named after me.
I
Yeah,
know
she
that.
has a
Ooh.
road.
Yes, you
She
do.
has a whole road.
So, I'm working on it. Cherry Blossom Lane.
I know, and I want you to talk about that. Would you please?
Yeah.
Well, why don't you talk about?
Well, why don't you ask me?
What were you talking about?
Ask,
If he would talk a little bit about Cherry Blossom Lane,
okay.
what you'd like to do with that?
I have a piece of road that runs between Meal and almost to Hunt's Corner Road. I own both sides of it. And there's 2,000 feet. And when I bought my property, when I got here in 1960, I said I had a piece of property on Rapids Road, and Rapids run into Sand Hill. Well, Sand Hill, and I'm sure that Nancy Eckerson will say, anybody from Sand Hill was dirtbags from
Way back when
way back. They were dirtbags. And,
I wouldn't have said that word.
well, I'm only saying it because as a term to use. I didn't find anything wrong with Sand Hill Road. I knew some people are over in Sand Hill area. I knew a lot of people over there. I used to shop at places. It was a nice, but for some reason or other, they got an idea. So as I going back and forth to Japan, I liked the cherry blossoms. And cherry blossom season just ended in Japan. Just starting here. It starts in Washington, D.C. about March 1st, and it runs the month of March. It's the same in Japan. Here, it runs in April and May. So I had a friend of mine in Japan that was going to give me all the cherry trees I wanted. And I went to U.S. Customs and Immigrations on one of my trips through. I says, can I bring in a tree? They said, no. I said, how does the President of the United States get trees? Because all those trees were brought in that are planted in Washington. But I couldn't bring one in. So I wrote to the Arbor Day Association. They said, yeah, you can buy them. So I purchased 150 flowering Japanese cherry trees.
Wow.
And at $5.95 a tree. And I planted them along the 2,000 foot of Sand Hill, that's my property, 33 feet from the road. Do you know why?
The roots?
No. 32 feet from the road, they have an easement on it. And they can chop anything down.
Oh.
So if you ever buy a house, don't plan anything or do anything 33 feet from the center of the road. Okay? That's a highway easement through there. So I planted them 33 feet, so they couldn't cut them down on me. And 30 feet apart, because they're going to grow 30 feet and spread 30 feet. Hopefully, they'll touch each other as they go. So when I became Citizen of the Year, I said I have 2 wishes before I go on the brown side of the grass. You know what the brown side of the grass is?
Underneath the grass.
That's right. Before I die, I would like to see Akron get an 8-lane pool, and I would like to change the name of Sand Hill Road to Cherry Blossom Lane. Well, guess what?
You got the 8-lane pool.
I got the 8-lane pool, and we're working on Cherry Blossom Lane. Right now, and we're talking on May 6th. It's my sister's birthday today. Next week, we should have most of my trees in full bloom. But unfortunately, we have, some of our trees we've had animals do a girdle around the bottom of the tree. That means chew the bark away, and it kills the tree.
Aww.
So I had to plant another one. So I've had to plant another 150. And some of them are big and some of them are little, but eventually I would like to see, because I think it would be beautiful, and I think the other homeowners could plant some trees, and somewhere down the line, when you got grandkids, you can take them to Sand Hill Road to see Cherry Blossom Lane.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you still have the mask from when you wrestled?
Oh, yes.
I don't
I
think
ha-
putting on an elementary.
I have mask, and I have some lady that's a seamstress in Akron that makes my Dr. X mask for me. Because I sell masks on my website. I have a website. www.thedestroyer.com. Can you remember that?
www.thedestroyer.com.
You lost a W.
So whatever.
Did you,
know,
have
it's
trouble?
so- it's-
Yeah, you did all right. Jim, did you have trouble with math?
See, but
W, C, there's no C in it.
but see,
www.
in game sites, there's two W's and then there's a number before you get into the game site in some of the game
Oh, I
sites.
don't play any game sites.
And I did just fine in math.
Pardon?
I did just fine in math.
Oh, good.
Gym was my worst subject.
I have Destroyer masks. I have Dr. X masks. I have some that I have my ring masks that I sell that I wore in the ring. Those are expensive.
Very expensive, I imagine.
No, I only have that a few amount, and they sell on eBay for $400. But my other masks you can get for $15. I have masks. So if you want to go as the Destroyer some Halloween, you write www.thedestroyer.com and you order a Destroyer mask. You can get a red one, a green one, a blue one, a black one. Or you can get a Dr. X mask. That covers more of your face.
Ooh, I have to run and do that now. Okay, you said that you met a lot of like TV stars and people, and athletes. What's the most unique person that you met, like athlete?
The most unique one, let's see. I've met Jumbo Ozaki, who's a Japanese golfer, and he was good because we played a foursome one time, and he had the courage to put on a Destroyer mask and try and play. And the first time he hit the ball, he knocked it out of bounds. And he was a real good golfer. I've met several sumo wrestlers who were very good, sumo grand champions. I've met a lot of baseball players. Jim Kelly and I, who's a quarterback with the Bills.
Was a quarterback with the Bills.
Well, was a quarterback. They never retire. He's a quarterback for the Bills. And Steve Tasker is very nice. And probably one of the most unique persons I've met is being inducted into the New York State Hall of Fame with me, and that's Ilio DiPaolo. Ilio came from Abruzzi, Italy. And he couldn't speak English. He wrestled at a few places, went to New York City, he started wrestling down there. And he met a woman that was the daughter of a wrestler and married her and moved to Buffalo. And he wrestled around Buffalo, and then he had polio when he was a kid. He had trouble with his leg, had his leg wired shut, so he couldn't move his ankle. Fused. He had his leg fused. And still wrestled with it, but it bothered him. So he retired, bought a pizza stand. They had a fire. Then he bought another place, pizza. Then he got a liquor license. Then he had some kids, and now his kids run his business. Unfortunately, Ilio's dead. But he's a fellow who came from the old country, which many people that I grew up with, grandmothers came from the old country, which was Poland, Germany, France, Spain, Italy. That's the old country. They came here. So Ilio is very unique, and he's being inducted at the same time I am. And I think it's going to be a pleasure for me to be inducted with him.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Um,
Got another one? Oh, you had a union. Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions.
yeah.
Okay. First, I would like to talk a little bit about, back in the beginning again, what you were discussing about starting 3 days a week to 5 days a week of wrestling and not making enough to live on in the beginning. What did you do at that point to supplement your income?
I was a substitute teacher in Ohio, too.
Oh, in Ohio you were also?
Yeah.
Okay.
But at that particular time, when I was only wrestling 3 days a week, I was staying in Al Half's motel, and he was the promoter, and he did not charge me. And I trained every day at 261 South High Street, 3rd floor, where they had a ring. And then at night I went to the Y and trained some more. And I trained with a fellow by the name of Eddie Elbers. He was about 6'5", weighed 300. And the promoter in Ohio said, if you can get him down to 280 pounds, we'll start you guys wrestling. So I could live on working 3 days a week because we could get steak and fries, all the fries you want, for $1.09 at a place in Columbus. So
Food.
every night we went, we didn't eat much breakfast or lunch, but we garbaged up at supper for $1.09. So
I guess you were not married at this time.
No,
When
no, I was
did you get
single.
married?
I got married in '59.
And how many children did you have?
I had 3, 2 boys and a girl.
Have any of them followed in your wrestling footsteps?
Yes, my oldest boy has, and I trained my youngest son. When my oldest boy wanted to become a wrestler, he was 30 years old, and I told him it was too late for him to start, but I trained him at a health gym out near where Ilio DiPaolo's restaurant is. They allowed me to set up the ring, so I told my youngest son, who was home at the time, I said, I'm going to train him, I'll train you too. And I trained another local boy by the name of Blake Bednarz. He went to Syracuse University. I trained him. And they were ready to wrestle when they were ready to wrestle. I couldn't get a place for them to wrestle. I couldn't get a territory. It was kind of like me when I first started out writing the 50 promoters. I knew these promoters. I would call Vern Gagne, who I wrestled many times. I would call Bill Watts. They said, well, get your kids some experience and then we'll bring them in. I says, where the hell do you get the experience? So anyway, he had trouble getting started. One enjoyment I had in training him was the last match that I had. He was my tag team partner. So we wrestled in Tokyo, Japan, July the 29th, 1993. And he was my partner, along with Giant Baba.
And what's your son's name?
Kurt. I have a son, Kurt. I have a daughter, Chris. We kind of like the K's. And then we had another son, was going to be Kyle. But I watched him being born, and I says, he's a Richard.
So is Kurt still involved, or did he?
No, he's involved now. He's 42 years old. And he's involved now in small independent shows, more or less for the enjoyment of it than making the money from it. He hurt his shoulder when he was in Japan, and it's never really come back on him.
Any more?
I think that's all for mine. Do you have more on your list, Hank?
I think that's about it. Unless you want to talk about World War II.
My experience in World War II was a little bit like my wife. I'm 3 years older than she is, but I can remember December 7th was a Sunday. And Sunday morning, I was coming home from Sunday school at 12 o'clock. I was walking. And there was a little candy store that I used to go into. I think maybe I used to save a nickel out of my money I was supposed to put in a church basket. It found a way to stay in my pocket so I could buy some candy on the way home. I'm not so sure, but maybe. Ooh, somebody's shaking a finger at me. I was a bad boy at some times. But anyway, on the radio, and this was 12 o'clock, they said the Japanese are bombing Pearl Harbor. It's kind of like 9/11. You watched the television in the morning and you saw an airplane. You didn't see the first one, but you saw the second one. And I'm listening to the radio and I said, I can't believe it. The Japanese, this was December 7th, 1941. I was 11 years old. So I was shocked. So I lived with the war. And what you people haven't, nobody's mentioned the fact that gasoline went on ration. You couldn't get all the gas you wanted. In order to get gasoline, you had stamps. And you had an A stamp or a B stamp or a C stamp. If you had an A stamp, you couldn't get very much gasoline. Maybe 2 gallons a week or 3 gallons a week. You had stamps that you went to the meat. You couldn't just go to the supermarket. You had to go to a meat market, and you had a meat stamp. You had stamps for sugar. We were rationed. So you wonder, how did I get that big? Well, my mother and my grandmother, we lived together. They baked every Saturday. Kuchens, cakes, bread.
Wow.
They baked every Saturday. The kitchen table was loaded. So most people did that. I can remember my mother making fudge and me selling it in the neighborhood for money.
Wow.
So I think we have been at war. That was World War II. We went to the Korean War. We went to Vietnam. We had Desert Storm. But we have never been in a war like World War II where we really rationed. Everything was rationed. And everybody had to go into service. There were draft dodgers, but most people wanted to go in and serve their country, or you got drafted. So I don't think the teenagers or the kids today realize what their grandfathers or grandparents went through in World War II. And I'm not sure about World War I because that was before my time, but it might have been the same thing. But it was tough growing up during the war. I mean, I had 3 sisters and myself, my mother and father, my grandmother and grandfather. We all lived in the same house. There was only 2 bedrooms.
Wow.
And 1 bath.
Oh my God.
And no shower. We had a bathtub.
Oh my gosh.
So, but my grandmother and grandfather lived upstairs in the attic. It was a room up there finished off. So they lived up there. They came down to eat with us. We didn't have a refrigerator. We had an Eisenboxer. That's I travel with Elio DiPaolo, and I used to
know.
tell people, he taught me how to speak Italian. He says, hey, Destroyer, I teach you Italian. You know, refrigerator, I tell you, refrigerator, I's a boxer. So we had an ice box, and the ice man would come down the street. We'd buy 50 pounds of ice and put it in our ice chest, and that's how we kept our food halfway decent. In the wintertime, we could buy ice cream if it was below 32 degrees. Other than that, we couldn't buy ice cream because ice cream didn't last in an ice box. You knew that, right?
Yeah, I knew that.
Because there's no freezer part.
I know.
But we used to have a box out. My dad made a box out the window, and it was outside. And we used to keep our milk or something out there. But if it got real cold, like the milk would freeze and the cream would come over the top of the bottle. So it was.
In Buffalo? Was your childhood in Buffalo?
Yes, I grew up in Buffalo.
What part?
I grew up in the Kensington section. Went to 61 school. Went to Seneca High School. My sisters, we all went to 61 school. One of my sisters went to Kensington. The other two went to Bennett. And we had to walk, all of us walked better than a mile to school. My two that went to Bennett had to walk through a quarry. There was no roads. There was no road. They had the first one through made the path. And that was about, I'm talking, distance between here and Mary's good and plenty in town, from one end of the quarry to the other where you got to a street. My other sister went to Kensington. She had streets to walk on. But that was quite a long way. And I went to Seneca, which was on Delavan Avenue. So, yeah, you know, we never thought we were poor. Here you live. You got all these people living on. I slept with my sister until she was 12. Then my older sister says, I think it's time to separate those two. We slept in the dining room on a fold-out couch, or not couch, bed. A spring bed that flipped over, and then flipped the mattress over. So they said they're going to separate us. Where do you think I ended up?
On the floor?
No, I was up in the attic.
With Grandma and Grandpa?
Well, they had a room. I was in the cold part of the attic. But you know what? Christmas time, all the cookies used to be stored on the steps because it was cool up in the attic. And all the cookies that they made. And on the way to bed.
There'd be a couple missing.
Yes, there would.
There's a plus side to everything, isn't there?
You try to make it that way.
Well, thank you for coming. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Well, it was nice talking to you. And if we could roll the clock back about 15 years, I'd take you back to gym.
No.
No. Did you love me? No.
I was a gym teacher. I did not like gym. I never